Before I give it the mic, I have a little gift here for the governor. He's a baseball player. I mentioned baseball that he played at Yale, and I couldn't think of a nicer gift to give him than the jersey of a gentleman who did so much for our region, a real hero of Pittsburgh. And I want to present this to Governor Desantis.
Well, good evening. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Keith, for that great introduction. Truth be told, he did mention my family's Western Pennsylvania roots. There are photos of me as a young kid in Steelers regalia. Now, I did become a Bucks fan, and we obviously had some tough years in the past, but actually had a very good year. But I told myself, the last thing I'm going to do in front of a bunch of Yinzers is talk about Tom Brady, so don't worry about that. Now, Keith is a good friend. He's actually the godfather of our oldest daughter, Madison. And before we had kids, my wife and I were in Israel, and we were looking forward to having a family. So we decided to bring back a bunch of water for the Sea of Galilee so that we could use that for our kids' baptism. So we did it. Keith came, we did it, it went very well. We obviously had more water because we wanted to make sure we had it for any subsequent kids that came. Well, my son was born in March of 2018. I was running for governor. I was a member of Congress. Life was busy. We tried to figure out, when are we going to do this baptism? We said, you know what, we've got to get through the election, and then we'll take a breath and figure out how we're going to do it. And so we decided, since I'm getting inaugurated in Tallahassee, we would just do it after the inauguration at the governor's mansion, and a lot of friends and family would be in town, and it worked out well. We had the water from the Sea of Galilee. We used that, and we had more left over because, we didn't know what we were going to have, what was in store for us. Well, we weren't used to having people pick up for us, and so the water was just in a normal water bottle. So we left it out. We started to get ready. We went to the inaugural ball. We came back, wake up the next morning, and I asked my wife, I said, hey, did you get the Sea of Galilee water? She said, no. And I was like, oh, no. So I went downstairs. I looked out to where we did it in the governor's mansion. No more Sea of Galilee water. They didn't know. It was just a bottle of water. So they got rid of it. And so I told that story publicly. And about 2 days later, I had people sending me pictures of people in Israel in the Sea of Galilee taking water out. And now on my desk, I have a big jar of water from the Sea of Galilee. And nobody's going to mistake that for Zephyr Hills. It was good because we did end up having we had another daughter when COVID really hit at the end of March in 2020. So we have 3 kids, 4, 3, and 1 running around the governor's mansion. So when people sometimes ask me, Governor, what have you learned since being governor? I think they're thinking like, oh, well, when a hurricane comes, you do this, or in a crisis, or you do this. And actually, the first thing that I think about, knowing that we got the 3 little ones at home, and my wife would agree to this, what we've learned since being governor, finger paint comes out of the state dining room, wallpaper, slime comes off the oriental rugs in the main office area. So we live and we learn. But we are happy to be here. Now, I had to make an exception when Keith asked me to come because I normally only do things in free states. I usually don't travel to lockdown states. So just understand. But we are proud of what we have done in Florida. When you had states throughout this last year, like Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, California, when they kept locking people down, Florida lifted people up. While in all these lockdown states closed schools, shuttered businesses, and destroyed lives, were the norm, in Florida, we've had schools open the entire school year. Our businesses are thriving, and we've saved millions of livelihoods from the brunt of lockdowns. And all I can say to any state that has not followed suit, open your state, open your schools, take off these mask mandates, let people live and thrive. Now, we were accused of disregarding or only caring about the economy or this, and the fact of the matter is we had an approach that tried to take everything into account. When states were forcing seniors, sick seniors back into nursing homes, Florida did the opposite. We barred hospitals from sending the infected patients back into nursing homes. We built COVID-only nursing facilities to take care of people who needed to be isolated and could be dealt with appropriately. When it came time to do the vaccines, we did not listen to the bureaucrats at CDC. We put our senior citizens first for vaccinations, and the results speak for themselves. In fact, Florida has less per capita COVID mortality than the national average, much less than states like Pennsylvania and New York, and our senior citizens, 40 states have higher per capita COVID mortality for senior citizens than the state of Florida. We focused on protecting our vulnerable population, but we did not suppress our society. Our schools have been open. Every parent has a right to send their kid to school in person in the state of Florida. Everybody has a right to work, and every business has a right to operate. So we've not only done better on COVID than most of our peer states, we've obviously done better economically. Our unemployment rate's 4.7%. Pennsylvania's, I think, is 50-60% higher than Florida's unemployment rate. And of course, I was talking to folks here in Allegheny County. You don't even have 100% of the schools open, and this is over a year after COVID first started to hit. I'm sorry, that is a disgrace. These schools should be open, and these parents should be able to send their kids to school in person. So while all these different states pursued different paths, obviously Florida, we were more unique. I can say at the end of the day, our state's thriving. I think the fact that we led from the beginning, if we had not led, I don't think you would have seen Texas and some of these other states do what they did. And quite frankly, I think some of the lockdown states would have locked down even harder had Florida not done what we did. And so a leader has to make a determination. And one of the things I kept coming back to, because I would see these governors, and they would hide behind the bureaucrats. They'd say, oh, the bureaucrats are telling me I have to close everything. The bureaucrats are telling me I have to do this. Your job as a leader is to make decisions. You can't subcontract out leadership to health bureaucrats. And so when it came right down to it, in Florida, we chose freedom over Fauciism. Florida's led against lockdowns, but that's only one of many issues that Florida is leading on. Florida ran perhaps the most efficient and transparent election anywhere in the country in 2020. We counted 11 million votes, 99% by midnight on election night. We did it right. And it was because we took action early in my governorship by removing officials in some of the problem counties. And when COVID hit, we did not throw aside our whole election rules. We followed the rules. We didn't send out ballots to everyone who didn't request them like they did in many of these other states. And the result was an election that people have confidence in. But at the same time, I looked around the country and I saw a lot of problems in some of these other states. And I didn't want to see Florida ever go down that road. So I told my legislature, we've got to stay ahead of the curve on that. And so a couple weeks ago, I signed the strongest election integrity measures anywhere in the country. With the stroke of my pen, we banned ballot harvesting in the state of Florida. We banned sending mass unsolicited ballots out. Places don't even know where these ballots are going. And we also banned Zuckerbucks. These private groups that spend millions of dollars like they did right here in Pennsylvania to actually run the elections. That will never happen in the state of Florida. So we were the leader in 2020, and we're continuing to lead going into the 2022 election cycle. We're proud of that. We're also proud of the fact that when last summer you saw cities in this country ablaze, Florida stood behind the men and women of law enforcement 100%. We called out the National Guard. We empowered our sheriffs and our other police forces. We told them we'd stand with you. The result was you didn't see some of the things you saw in these other cities in the state of Florida. And you know what? These areas that are trying to defund the police, that don't stand by the police, what's happening? Crime is skyrocketing in many of these cities as a result of them not standing for law and order and standing with law enforcement. And so I saw that trend going on throughout the country. I said Florida handled last summer very well. But again, we've got to be on offense. We've got to stay ahead of the curve. So a month ago, I signed the strongest anti-rioting, pro-police legislation anywhere in the country. And we say very clearly in that we are not going to let any local government in the state of Florida defund law enforcement. We, the state, will put that money back so that we're protecting the folks in those communities. And we also are saying very clearly, if you loot, if you riot, if you are engaged in violence against police officers or anybody else, in Florida, you're not getting a slap on the wrist. You are going to jail. And not only are we not defunding the police, we're funding the police and then some. I just got authorized through the legislature $1,000 bonuses for every single sworn law enforcement officer and first responder in the state of Florida. Florida's also leading on school choice. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, I signed the largest expansion of school choice in decades in this country. I've also, over the last 2 years, and we've done more and more every year, we need to get the Constitution and civics back in the classroom for our kids. They need to understand the principles that made this country great. They need to understand our great founding fathers, like people like Benjamin Franklin from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And it needs to be taught accurately and fairly. And in Florida, we have banned the use of critical race theory and other leftist ideologies. Teaching people to hate their country or to hate each other is not worth one dime of taxpayer dollars in our school system. Florida's also leading on taking on the big tech oligarchs in Silicon Valley who want to suppress conservative speech and want to decide elections. Now, when we were initially, when tech came on the scene, it was actually very liberating. I mean, it used to be you'd have kind of the same TV networks, the same newspapers. Many of these outlets were totally untrustworthy. They had lost the confidence of the American people. And so you have internet. Then you had the ability to do social media. And all these other things actually gave conservatives the ability to go around the legacy media. We were able to have our voices elevated. Donald Trump used it very effectively to get elected president in 2016. But you know what? a lot of those folks didn't like the fact that he used it very successfully. So Silicon Valley had been a liberating force to have all this great way to connect, and then they started to change the last 4 or 5 years, and instead they're using their power, and it is monopoly power. They're using that power to suffocate speech that they don't like, to marginalize voices, and even to deplatform them entirely. And so within the next couple of weeks, I will sign the first piece of legislation that any state has done to fight back against big tech censorship, to allow you, if you're censored or deplatformed, to sue big tech, to make sure that their algorithms and the things that they're using to manipulate search results and all these other things that affect our lives every day in ways that we can't even comprehend, that all of that is transparent. We also want to protect against big tech interfering in our elections. They should not be able to deplatform Republican candidates for office. They shouldn't be able to suppress negative information about their preferred candidates. And so we are fighting back against big tech. We typically view, and the founders viewed, any big source of power as problematic, but in their time it was mostly from the government. Now these are quote-unquote private companies, but if you see the way they're acting, they're basically an extension of the ruling class. They're trying to enforce preferred narratives of corporate media and other people in academia and, of course, in the Democrat Party. I think that we're so used to seeing freedom being threatened by a bearded tyrant and military fatigues, and rightfully so, because that happens. But we are seeing freedom of expression limited by these oligarchs in Silicon Valley. You know, these people that are, they don't look like the typical tyrant. They're pajama boys, basically, okay? But they're very destructive in what they've been doing. So we've got to start fighting back against this, and in Florida, we are doing that. So we're proud to have led the charge against COVID lockdowns, but we're also very proud of all the other things that we've been able to accomplish. And so, you know, there's a lot of talk about unity or disunity in the Republican Party, this person, that person. You know, a lot of that I don't concern myself with, up or down, who's up or down. But I will tell you this, as we look forward to the fights ahead, we cannot, indeed we will not, go back to the days of the failed Republican establishment of yesteryear. We are not going to do that. We have to reject open borders. We have to stand for the rule of law and American sovereignty, and we cannot be for amnesty in any form. We've got to stand with the American people, and we have to put Americans first. We also have to reject, and this is something we see with the Biden administration, weakness in the face of the threats posed by China, not just in terms of military, but also what their economic rise means for American workers and American businesses. And I'll tell you what, the person who saw this better than anyone was President Donald Trump. As a veteran of the Iraq campaign, I can say we have to reject using our military in ways that lack a clear connection to our own national security, and we cannot allow our country to be dragged in endless wars with no metric for victory. If we are going to put our men and women in harm's way, we have got to make sure that they are going for something tied directly to our national security, that there's a clear objective that they can achieve, and then they can come home. So I look at what's going on in terms of the fights ahead, and I really hope that in November of 2022, that Florida, people will look at Florida, my re-election, the legislature, all that, and that we'll have a banner night. But I am looking at these other states, particularly Pennsylvania. You need to elect a Republican governor in 2022. I got elected to Congress in 2012, so it was about a decade ago that I got into politics, and I got in to oppose Barack Obama. I I even wrote a book, which was read by about a dozen people, about the dangers that that administration posed, how it was not motivated by a philosophy that was consistent with our founding principles, and I stand by that. I think that was correct, but I also have to admit, looking back on that, the threats we faced then seem almost quaint in comparison to what we're facing now. Because the fact of the matter is the left in this country has grown more militant and much more dangerous in this intervening time. They not only want to do much more radical things, but they also want to write the conservative half of the country off. They want these elections bills that they're doing in Washington. They want mandatory ballot harvesting, no voter ID, all these things to basically pack the Supreme Court. They're trying to solidify themselves in power in perpetuity. It's very, very dangerous, and it's something that we have to take very seriously. So when you're fighting these fights, and when we're up against that, just understand, if you are going to make a difference, you're going to have to stand against some pretty serious headwinds. If you stand for conservative principles, you will be attacked by a very corrupt and partisan corporate media. That will happen as a Republican. And it's not just shows like 60 Minutes, which they tried to come to Florida. They did 3 months trying to dig up dirt on me, and the best they could come up with was a half-baked conspiracy that even major Democrats were saying was an outright lie. But this is something that's part and parcel of what corporate media has become. They don't care about the facts. They care about partisan narratives. And if there's somebody that they don't like, somebody that's standing up against their orthodoxy and their narrative, like me, they're going to come after you. But you can't back down from that. You've got to be willing to fight back. And I think when you look at the 60 Minutes, the fact that it blew up in their face was because we fought back. We did not take that sitting down. We told the truth, and the American people responded. And I had people writing in from all across the country to my office saying what a farce it was, and they were so happy to have somebody who was willing to stand up. But you got to stand up. I mean, I looked the other day, I don't know if you saw, there was the police shooting in Columbus, Ohio, right? So you have a lady who is wielding a knife after being called to the scene. Somebody called, the purported victim called, said, someone's got a knife, they're coming after me. And so then the police officer responds, you do have a lady wielding a knife. And so the police officer did exactly what the officer's trained to do, made commands, she wasn't listening, so he engaged, and he probably saved this other woman's life. NBC News, when they put that on their newscast that night, they played the 911 call, and they edited out the portion where the victim was talking about the knife. And then when they showed the actual camera footage of the altercation, they cut out the portion that showed the attacker with the knife. That was deliberate. That was intentional. They were trying to put a target on that police officer's back. They were trying to further a narrative that law enforcement is attacking somebody with no basis simply because the person happened to be a different skin color. That was deliberate, it was a lie, and quite frankly, that is evil. They are trying to divide our country, and we've got to call them out on that. So what I would say to Republicans, don't seek approval from these people. They don't like you. They will smear you. They will attack you. The way to win is to fight back and not take it anymore. And the truth always prevails. People understand. The whole last year, corporate media has tried to tell people that Florida was doing so poorly and everything like that. Every day, day after day, obviously trying to attack me. But yet, people are flooding into my state. The home values are through the roof. Our unemployment's as low as could reasonably expected given some of the restrictions that the federal government still imposed on some of the tourism. And so people see through these narratives. So understand that and don't let these people set the agenda for our party anymore. And I think it's important because I was reminded about thinking about being in Pennsylvania and thinking about the Constitution being written in Pennsylvania, and many of you have probably been over on the other side of the state to see where that had happened. It was a very difficult time. I mean, the founders, they risked their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor in order to stand for freedom. They really didn't need to do it. I mean, most of them were pretty successful. They had tolerable lives for sure, under British colonial rule, but they wanted to put a marker down, and they were willing to risk everything for it. And so they win the American Revolution. They need a form of government because what they had was failing. So they worked to craft this Constitution, and there was a lot of different things that were debated. There was a lot of controversy. The whole convention almost failed on numerous occasions, but through it all, they were able to come up with what's been, I think, the greatest written Constitution that's ever been produced. Towards the end of the convention, as they're all signing the Constitution, Benjamin Franklin, he stood up, and mindful of the trials and tribulations that had happened in the convention, he looked up to the front of the room where George Washington had been sitting, and on Washington's chair, there was a sun that was kind of halfway up over the top of the chair. And Franklin said, I've been looking at that sun through the course of the convention. I couldn't for the life of me decide whether that sun was rising or that sun was setting. He's like, now by our actions today, I am more confident than ever that is a rising sun signifying the rise of a Republican form of government and a new and envious free society. What they did required strength. It required them to stand up and hold the line and be counted. And so as we look at all the things we have to fight against, we fight against this militant left, we fight against corporate media, you have big tech, you have universities doing all this stuff, even woke corporations now are getting in on this. There's a lot of stuff that we've got to be willing to stand up against and hold the line. But I think there's no substitute for having courage, to showing the courage of your convictions. It's very easy to stand for the right things when the winds are blowing at your back. It's much harder to do that in the midst of stormy seas. It's much harder to do that when people are firing arrows at you all the time. I can tell you, I have experience in fielding a lot of that stuff, a lot of that incoming fire. But when you stand up, when you don't back down, I can tell you Republican voters throughout my state of Florida, they appreciate you for it. And they will walk over hot coals with bare feet to be able to support Republican candidates if the Republicans will stand up and stand up for them. So my message to all of you is stand your ground, hold the line, don't back down. And I can tell you this, in the state of Florida, with me as governor, I have only begun to fight. Thank you all. God bless you. Thank you.